One was worried and the other was weak. Leo stood beside them, looking at the two with a blank expression. Just now Lucas was still lively and kicking, but within a second he became seriously ill. Elena sat in front of the hospital bed, inquiring about Lucas' well-being and telling him to recuperate properly. If he needed anything, he could just ask Leo for it. The anesthetic that Lucas inhaled had long been metabolized and his body was neither sick nor in pain. He stayed in the hospital only because of Leo's instructions. He thanked Ms. Elena for her concern and said that after he recovered, he would continue to go to work and serve the company and the president. Ms. Elena should know that they were underground lovers. At this time, she didn't choose to expose it and Lucas continued to play dumb, only regarding Leo as his superior. While the two were talking, Leo didn't interrupt. He looked at the fruit plate on the bedside table, stretched out his finger, and picked up the grape that Lucas had plucked and then thrown back before. He peeled the thin skin of the grape. While Elena was talking, he suddenly held the peeled pulp to Lucas' mouth. Lucas subconsciously opened his mouth and bit the grape pulp with his teeth. Leo's fingers were pinching the grape skin and faintly touched Lucas' rosy lips. Lucas was chewing the pulp when he realized the feeling of the fingers rubbing against his lips. So his face blushed instantly. Just then, Leo still asked, "Is it sweet? Is the one at the tip the sweetest?" Last time, Leo asked her to whisper in Alexander's ear, and Elena did as he asked. Later, Alexander really relaxed his guard against Leo. But at that time, Leo was ambiguous about his relationship with Lucas. Elena still couldn't figure out whether they were in love or not. Before she came to visit Lucas this time, she had decided not to mention that matter directly. But unexpectedly, Leo actually fed Lucas grapes in front of her. Lucas ate so naturally, obviously having gotten used to this kind of feeding action. "Look, they are so intimate. Can you still say they are not in love?" Elena felt a sense of suffocation again. What she had been constantly doubting was finally confirmed. Elena couldn't tell if she felt relieved or on the verge of a heart attack. She composed herself, then turned to Leo and said, "I'd like to have a private conversation with Secretary Lucas." Lucas' heart immediately tightened. Was the legendary scenario of "here's 100 million, leave my son" finally about to happen? Leo remained calm. He wiped his hands with a wet wipe nearby, stood up and said, "Then I'll go out and make a call." After saying that, he left the ward. Lucas watched the back of the president disappear at the door longingly. Now there was no one to cover for him. Lucas could only look at Elena and said, "Madam, just say what you want to say directly." Instead of directly saying something like, "Leave my son quickly," Elena asked, "Do you have any siblings?" Lucas was stunned for a moment and replied, "No, I'm an only child." Elena thought to herself that he had also ruined an only child family. How good at choosing was her son? She asked again, "So you came to City S alone?" Lucas said, "Yes, my parents are all in our hometown. It's quite tough." "What do your parents do for a living?" "My father is a teacher and my mother is an accountant." He came from a decent family. Elena's heart sank a little more. She continued, "It's very hard to struggle alone in City S. Do you have a house and a car?" What kind of questions were these? It was so much like relatives of a blind date partner inquiring about the man's conditions. Lucas couldn't help but feel a little panicked. Did Ms. Elena think his conditions were poor? He definitely couldn't compare with Leo. Would Ms. Elena think he was unworthy of Leo? Lucas nervously answered the question, "I have a car for daily use, but I haven't bought a house yet." He quickly showed his family's financial strength and ambition. "But I'm about to buy one. There are several houses in my hometown. My parents said they could sell the other houses to pay the down payment in City S if necessary, but I didn't agree. I want to earn money through my own efforts and strive to gain a foothold in City S." After hearing this, Elena sighed inwardly. What an ambitious young man. Nowadays, there aren't many people who don't rely on their parents and are willing to struggle on their own. Elena increasingly felt that Lucas was originally a down-to-earth and ambitious young man, but was forced to have an affair with his boss. All of this was forced by Leo. But there was also another possibility. Lucas actively seduced Leo and was coveting Leo's wealth. Elena tentatively said, "Ask Leo to find you a bigger house to live in." Lucas was stunned. His trial had finally come. Ms. Elena should be testing him. Nowadays, it's no longer popular to directly offer 100 million. Instead, it's to say they'll buy a house for him. In order to show that he regarded money as dirt and truly loved Leo, Lucas firmly said, "Of course not. I can get a house through my own efforts." He looked at Elena sincerely and expressed his determination to her. "I won't let Mr. Leo spend an extra cent on me. He only takes double the salary and doesn't want 100 million. Lucas even said I can sign a property contract. Anyway, they've already signed a love contract. Elena showed a loving look. Just as she thought, if this young man hadn't met Leo, he would have lived an ordinary life, worked an ordinary job, then met someone he liked, got married and had children, living an ordinary life. But now Leo had taken a fancy to him. He was forced to be involved in the disputes of the wealthy family, was kidnapped and almost lost his life. How pitiful. Lucas had no idea that Elena had imagined him as an innocent young man succumbing to his boss's coercion. He still looked at Elena with an innocent and pure look and said, "Madam, all of this is my own will." In Elena's mind, Lucas was already so infatuated with her son that he was completely devoted. After thinking about it, she could only sigh faintly and say, "Actually, I'm here with a mission." Only then did Lucas look serious and said earnestly, "Madam, I'm listening." Elena said, "Can you persuade Leo to let Sherexian off?" Lucas didn't expect Elena to bring up this matter directly, so he had to say, "Madam, you think too highly of me." The chairman is really grasping at straws. He actually thought of asking him to whisper in Leo's ear. Even if his secret relationship with the president were real, the president isn't the kind of person who gets carried away by love and makes random corporate decisions. Elena said, "I don't understand the company's affairs either, but I still got involved. You're with Leo at work, so you're even better than me." Lucas said, "But no one can shake Mr. Leo's decision. You know that better than I do." Elena was a little puzzled. Why did Lucas still call Leo Mr. Leo? Did they address each other like this in private too? Lucas then said, "Moreover, I firmly support Mr. Leo's ideas. No matter what he wants to do, I'll fully support him." He said softly, "So, whether it's useful or not, I won't ask him to spare Carter. As expected, he's completely devoted." Elena knew it was useless to say anything. Elena looked into Lucas's clear eyes and thought of herself. Back then, she also had such a pure heart and wholeheartedly supported her husband's career. Who would have thought it would end up like this, caught between her husband and son, being in an awkward position on both sides? Leo stood in the hospital corridor, hands in his pockets, looking straight ahead through the corridor window. Even now, he still often thinks about that night. He keeps wondering what would have happened if Lucas hadn't escaped, what would have happened if Lucas hadn't held on tightly when climbing the wall, and what would have happened if he hadn't arrived in time and Carter had discovered Lucas's whereabouts. He knew it was meaningless to simulate these things that hadn't happened, but he just couldn't help it. He couldn't help thinking about what would happen to him if something happened to Lucas. Leo suddenly wanted to smoke. He hated the smoky smell, but at this moment he wanted to numb himself with nicotine. At this time, Elena walked out of the ward and came to Leo's side. Leo turned his head and looked at his mother. Elena suddenly hit him. While patting Leo's arm, Elena said, "It's all your fault. You've caused trouble to others." Leo didn't know what Lucas had said to Ms. Elena and why she had such an idea. However, it didn't matter. If she thought it was causing trouble, then so be it. After venting her anger, Elena finally stopped and said, "Your father asked me to come and see how things are going." Leo nodded and said, "I know. He also asked me to persuade you not to be so extreme and to show mercy in everything," Elena said matter-of-factly. Leo said, "I can't do it." His tone was cold. "I want Carter to be ruined." Here, be ruined doesn't mean physically dead, but to make Carter lose all his reputation and possessions. Elena hesitated a bit and said, "But after all, it was he who led people to find your whereabouts when you were a child." Leo said, "I've been as kind as I can be. He shouldn't have touched the people around me." Over the years, he had endured enough. Endurance had never been his style. Elena was rejected by both Lucas and Leo today, but she was quite calm. She said, "Just now I said almost the same thing to Lucas and he told me that he would fully support you." Leo's eyes softened. Seeing the change in his expression, Elena understood everything. She said, "I'll try my best to persuade your father to let it go." It was really hard for Elena to be caught between her husband and son. Leo knew that his mother had been trying to find a middle way over the years, but he was destined to disappoint her. Since the matter of Carter was hopeless, Elena changed the topic and said, "You and Lucas. Just let it be for now. Anyway, there is no better way." Although Alexander doesn't entirely believe the saying of flying into a rage for a beautiful woman, he also thinks there is such a factor involved. In Alexander's eyes, his youngest son has become more like a human being rather than a machine because of Lucas. Maybe Lucas being with Leo can really maintain the most stable state at present. But Elena still felt a bit uncomfortable. "Although Lucas is a nice person, I still hope you can get married and have children." Leo didn't say a word. Elena sighed and turned away. Leo returned to the ward and saw Lucas still lying in the hospital bed but covering his head with the quilt. Hiding under the quilt, he asked in a muffled voice, "Has the madam left?" Leo replied, "She's gone." Then he reached out to remove the quilt. "Aren't you hot?" It was summer. Lucas' bright eyes appeared and stared straight at Leo. He said remorsefully, "Mr. Leo, I think I didn't act well just now." Recalling the conversation with Elena just now, he deeply felt that there were several parts where he didn't perform well. He even wished he could call Ms. Elena back and do it all over again. Leo looked down and said, "It's good enough. Get up." Lucas looked at the president in confusion. Leo said, "Get out of the hospital." Lucas jumped up suddenly and said happily, "Can we leave?" Leo nodded. "Yes. Anyway, Ms. Elena has come. Alexander won't step in again. There's no point in staying in the hospital anymore." Leo told Lucas a fact. "In the chairman's eyes now, I'm deeply in love with you and would go through fire and water for you. After you're out of the hospital, you also have to cooperate with me in playing this affectionate persona. Understand?" Lucas quickly said, "Understood. I'll play a bewitching concubine who disrupts the court, seducing you every day and making you love me more than the throne." Saying he is a beauty himself without even blushing. With a straight face, Leo said, "It's impossible not to love the kingdom. You'll also start work tomorrow." Truly a capitalist. He kind of wanted to work when he was not allowed to before. Now that he could work, Lucas became lazy again and could only respond with a "oh." Leo called out, "Let's go." Lucas didn't have many things in the hospital. He easily completed the discharge procedures. He planned to go home by himself and wanted to say goodbye to Leo, but Leo directed him, "Get in the car." Lucas was confused. "I can just take a taxi back." Leo said, "Back to where?" Lucas said, "My own home." Leo reminded him, "I'm playing the role of a lovesick person now. Would a lovesick person let his just recovered lover go home alone?" Lucas was stunned. "It seems really not." Leo said again, "Get in the car." Lucas obediently got into Leo's car. This time, Leo didn't call the driver but drove the car himself, taking Lucas on the road. Lucas asked, "Mr. Leo, where are we going?" Leo said, "To my home." Lucas was surprised. "What's wrong with me taking my just discharged lover home to live? The logic is right, but it's a bit strange." Lucas quickly grasped the key point. "Really going to live at your place?" Leo drove the car, looking straight ahead, and asked, "Then go to your place?" Lucas was startled. "No, let's still go to your place." Come on, he rented a small place. How could he let the president go there? Besides, that Mr. Leo doll was still sitting on the cabinet. What if Leo found it? Lucas refused so quickly that it made Leo a bit dissatisfied, but he didn't say anything and continued driving. When they arrived at number 3 Yunting Mansion, Lucas couldn't help but sigh. He must have never imagined before that one day he would be so familiar with the president's house. Leo led Lucas into the house and directly said to him, "Go and have fun on your own first. I'll deal with some things and cook for you later." Leo said it so naturally that it made Lucas a bit dazed. He always felt that Leo's attitude had changed a bit after the kidnapping incident. Lucas couldn't say exactly where the change was. Anyway, in front of the president, he wasn't as constrained as before. Whether it was asking Leo to peel an apple or staying at Leo's house, he didn't feel any burden. Lucas walked into the audio-visual room with ease, turned on the mainframe and started playing games. He did everything by himself and Leo didn't care at all. While playing, Lucas thought that maybe he was being too presumptuous. Staying overnight at his boss's place wasn't really appropriate. It wasn't about avoiding suspicion. Anyway, it was his off-work time. To maintain the president's image as a loving person, anything could be understood. But didn't the president have a cleanliness fetish? Could he really tolerate someone staying at home? Leo hadn't been rejecting him recently, but maybe when it came to the crucial moment, Leo would find that he still couldn't accept it and ask him to set up a tent in the yard. And the president should have gone to the study to work. But here he was, indulging in playing. Leo should be very busy because of Shirexian's matter recently. Lucas thought about all these things but still didn't put down the game in his hand. He had to go to work tomorrow. Let him indulge himself one last time. Lucas was content to be lazy and even started playing a dance game, jumping around in the audio-visual room. He had been so bored during his hospital stay. It was a good chance to stretch his body. When he was dancing excitedly, he happily supported himself with his hands and did a Thomas spin. Suddenly, the door of the audio-visual room was opened and Leo stood at the door. Lucas was startled and then his joy turned to sorrow. Leo watched helplessly as Lucas spun around on the ground like a top. As there wasn't enough space, his leg kicked the sofa directly and then he plopped down on the ground, holding his toe with a pained expression. Leo paused for a moment and asked, "What are you doing?" Lucas held his foot, sucking in air through his teeth, too pained to speak. Leo looked at him and said, "It's time for dinner." Lucas looked at Leo pitifully, and it took him a long time to say, "Let me catch my breath." Leo walked over, crouched down in front of Lucas, and reached out his hand towards his foot. Lucas looked at the president in surprise. Leo held Lucas by the ankle and said, "Let me see how badly it's hurt." Lucas was scared to death and said, No, it'll be okay soon." The president was so extreme. Either he was so germ-phobic that he wouldn't let anyone get close, or he was so familiar that he dared to touch even his foot. Leo fixed Lucas' foot with one hand and placed the other on his own knee, looking intently at Lucas' toes with an extremely serious expression on his face. Lucas was so afraid that he would take off his sock that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Fortunately, Leo gave up in the end. It was still beyond him at present. He let go of his hand, and Lucas let out a sigh of relief and said, "Wait for me a minute. I'll be okay right away." It still hurt a bit now, but Leo didn't waste time waiting. He supported Lucas' back, wrapped his hand around the back of his knee, and picked Lucas up. Again? In the chairman's eyes, Leo is deeply in love. In Ms. Elena's eyes, Lucas is wholeheartedly devoted. Lucas never expected to be carried in a princess. Carried by Leo for the second time. This time, he hadn't inhaled the anesthetic and was fully conscious. His cheeks flushed again in a spineless way. Lucas nervously said, "Put me down." Leo didn't respond. He carried Lucas out of the audio-visual room and said, "Didn't you say your foot hurt?" Lucas grabbed Leo's clothes and tried hard to keep his balance, saying, "It doesn't hurt anymore. I can walk by myself." Leo still didn't put him down and carried him all the way to the dining room. Leaning against Leo's chest, Lucas didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Leo's hand firmly encircled him, and he moved so effortlessly as if Lucas didn't weigh anything at all. Finally, Leo placed him on a chair in the dining room, leaned over and asked, "Does it still hurt?" Leo still looked expressionless. There was no emotion in his dark eyes, but his tone was gentle. Lucas could feel that he was being cared about, and his heart felt warm. He looked up at Leo, smiled, and said, "It doesn't hurt anymore. It was just a bump on the toe. Nothing serious." Only then did Leo straighten up, tapped Lucas's forehead, and said, "Recklessness comes at a price. Do you understand?" Being lectured again, Lucas pouted. The president always alternated between rewards and punishments. After all this commotion, his foot didn't hurt anymore. Lucas quietly sat at the dining table waiting for dinner. This time, the dishes Leo cooked were relatively light, with many high-protein dishes. Obviously, he regarded Lucas as a patient and wanted to nourish him. Tasting the president's cooking again so soon, Lucas drank the soup contentedly and said, "A loss may turn out to be a gain." The president was being so nice to him out of guilt. It wasn't a bad deal. But Leo didn't like his easy-going attitude and said, "Children speak without thinking." He wouldn't let Lucas encounter the same thing again. After the two finished their meal, seeing that Leo didn't seem to be driving him away, Lucas asked, "Mr. Leo, do I really have to stay here tonight?" Looking at him, Leo said, "Wasn't it decided long ago?" Lucas asked eagerly, "Then where will I stay?" Surely he wouldn't really set up a tent in the yard. Leo led Lucas upstairs and pointed to a guest room for him, saying, "It's already tidied up, and there are changes of clothes inside. It seems that preparations had been made long ago." Lucas was once again touched by Leo's thoughtfulness. As long as Leo wanted to, he could arrange everything properly and treat people gently. How could he have thought that the president was cold-hearted back then? As long as one was included in Leo's circle of people he cared about, the experience would be simply wonderful. "Go to bed early. You still have to go to work tomorrow," Leo said. Seeing that it was still early, Lucas asked, "Mr. Leo, what are you going to do now? Do you still have to work?" Lucas finally remembered his duty as a secretary. If the president still had to work, he decided to assist him on the side. Leo said, "I'm not working. I'm going upstairs to work out." Lucas' eyes lit up. "Can I go with you?" Leo looked at him with his deep-set eyes. After a while, he said, "Yes." The gym was set up on the top floor. Half of the top floor was a glass solarium, and the other half was Leo's fitness area. So, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the gym, one could see through the layers of glass and have a panoramic view of the night outside. The scenery near Yunting Mansion was beautiful. The artificial lake was surrounded by blue waves, and there was a large green area, looking lush and green. On a summer night, the sky was especially clear. The stars broke through the blockade of urban pollution and twinkled on the black night sky. Lucas sat on the treadmill belt, watching Leo lift weights, his eyes full of novelty. As Leo moved, the smooth muscle lines showed through the thin t-shirt fabric, looking as beautiful as a carving. Leo didn't have a bulky build. He was tall and slender, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Everything was just right, showing strength while also having a sense of beauty. Lucas feasted his eyes and was a little lost in it. The president really had a good figure. No wonder he could pick him up so easily. Lucas was a bit envious and said, "Should I also start working out?" Although dancing requires strength, there was still a big gap. It would be great if he could train to be able to fight 10 people at once. Leo glanced at him, handed him the dumbbell in his hand, and said, "Start now." Lucas stepped back, shook his head, and said with a big smile, "Let's do it next time. I've just recovered from a serious illness." Leo didn't expose his laziness. He took the dumbbell back and did a few bicep curls. It was already midsummer. The air conditioner was on in the gym, but Leo still felt hot during the exercise. During the breaks between movements, he naturally lifted the hem of his clothes. So Lucas saw his abs. The well-defined muscles were covered with glistening water, moist and charming, exuding a sexy aura of hormones. Lucas stared at them fascinatedly and swallowed hard. He really wanted to reach out and touch them. They must feel great. Leo turned around and met Lucas' covetous gaze. He rarely had the illusion of being regarded as prey and asked, "What are you doing?" Lucas said innocently, "I'm not doing anything." Leo put his clothes down. Lucas felt a twinge of regret and at the same time praised himself in his heart. "You've got some nerve, Secretary Lucas. You're daring to covet the boss's body." Of course, Lucas only dared to think about it in his heart. After all, everyone wants to admire a good figure, but if he was really asked to reach out and touch, he wouldn't have the courage even if he was given 10 times the guts. The two of them stayed in the gym for an hour and a half. The atmosphere was good. Lucas and Leo both found that they were getting more and more natural when getting along privately, which was a great improvement compared to the previous awkward situation where they were at a loss. Leo sent Lucas to the door of the guest room and said, "Get some rest early." After thinking for a while, he added, "You have work tomorrow. Don't be late." Lucas said, "Don't worry, Mr. Leo." The two of them stood in the corridor. One didn't enter the room and the other didn't leave. They just stared at each other like this. Lucas was a bit reluctant to go to sleep. He looked at the time regretfully. It was really late. He looked at Leo and said softly, "Good night, Mr. Leo." Leo nodded as a response. Lucas turned around and walked into the guest room. Leo stood at the door, stared at the door for a while, and then walked towards his own bedroom. In the thick night, although they were not far apart, they slept deeply in their own rooms. They didn't share dreams, but they still slept soundly. The next morning, Leo got himself ready and walked out of the room. He saw that Lucas had already been waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He was wearing a shirt and a tie, looking impeccable from top to bottom. Even his hair was neatly combed. He had returned to his workday image. When Lucas saw Leo coming, he bowed slightly and said with a smile, "Good morning, Mr. Leo. I wish you a pleasant day in both life and work." Lucas was lively and mischievous yesterday, often making jokes and boldly teasing him. Today, Lucas was serious and proper, with a respectful attitude, as regular as the most competent secretary. This contrast made Leo feel a bit strange. Looking at him, he deliberately asked, "Does your foot still hurt?" Lucas remained calm after hearing this, and his smile was still gentle. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Leo. Thanks to you, it's completely healed. Leo nodded and continued. When you were doing centrifugal motion on the ground yesterday, you were moving so fast. I was worried that your toes were seriously injured. Lucas knew very well that Leo was deliberately bringing up his embarrassing incident, hoping to see him embarrassed. His smile remained unchanged as he said, Please rest assured, Mr. Leo. I have a tough skin and am not afraid of pain. Leo glanced at him. Lucas even prepared breakfast for Leo. It was just Western food like bread and milk, but he used the kitchen to fry an egg for Leo. If they were in the UK in the last century, Lucas should have warmed the newspaper for Leo. Leo looked at the almost square-shaped fried egg on the plate, was silent for a while, and asked, Why haven't you mastered the cooking? Lucas said seriously, If cooking were required for being a secretary, I would definitely learn it to get a full score. Fortunately, although the egg looked strange, it tasted okay. After Leo finished his breakfast, the two of them went to work together. Logically, they should avoid suspicion and go to the company separately, but it was completely unnecessary. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely proper. No one would have thought that they were pretending to be a couple yesterday. Today, in formal suits, they were just like business partners. Lucas respectfully opened the car door for Leo. After Leo got into the back seat of the car, he walked around to the driver's seat and drove. When they arrived at the company, the two entered the elevator together and walked into the president's office together, and no one thought it was strange. It was just the first day of work for Lucas after the accident. As soon as he stepped into the door of the president's office, someone immediately exclaimed, and then surrounded him to express their concern. Lucas smiled friendly at his colleagues. In the eyes of the assistants, Lucas had been on a secret mission during this period. Now that the mission was completed and he had successfully brought down Sherexion, he naturally returned in triumph. Lucas admired the imagination of his colleagues. They automatically filled in the gap during this period for him, and he didn't have to rack his brains to make up a story. Before Lucas came back, Leo had already made various preparations. Today, he didn't make any more explanations for Lucas and walked into his own office. Lucas sat in the secretary's seat at the door of the president's office, looking at his computer and folders. It had only been a week since he was off work, but it seemed like a lifetime ago. When he left the company from here that day and followed Leo on a field trip, he never thought that such a thing would happen. Now that he was back at his work post, he felt both grateful and touched. At this time, Nora walked over. Secretary Lucas. It was the first time Nora called him actively. Lucas looked up and smiled gently. How are you, Assistant Joseph? Nora was different from him. She returned to work on the third day. Leo had assigned her the task of creating public opinion, and she had done a good job. So when Lucas came back, the atmosphere in the company was so harmonious. Leo had well protected their reputations and nipped the gossips in the bud. At this time, Nora suddenly bowed deeply to Lucas, which startled Lucas. He quickly stood up from his seat and said, What are you doing? Nora said, Thank you. If it weren't for you, the one taken away that day would have been me. Lucas waved his hand. Actually, those people were all after me. You were just accidentally involved. Nora shook her head. Those are not important. The important thing is that you saved me. Nora heard what happened to Lucas later from Leo. She felt a chill down her spine. If it were her who was taken away, she definitely couldn't have escaped through the window like Lucas. The consequences would be unimaginable. And in the parking lot, it was Lucas who stopped those people regardless of everything. He could have stayed in the restaurant to ensure his own safety, but because he wanted to save her as soon as possible, he exposed himself to danger. Nora looked full of apology and said, You know, I have a rather peculiar personality. I had a prejudice against you before. Please don't take it to heart. Hearing Nora's sincere words, Lucas was filled with emotions and sincerely said, It's really great that you can let go of your prejudice. I hope we can get along harmoniously from now on. Nora's expression was a bit strange. Lucas asked, "What's wrong? Is there still something unresolved?" Nora said, "I can't say I've completely let go of my prejudice. I still think your looks have played a big role in your promotion path." He wanted to shout at Nora and ask, "What did you grow up on? It's a miracle that you can stand here properly." However, Nora quickly added, "Of course, your ability is still the decisive factor. I sincerely admire you." Lucas reluctantly accepted it. Nora picked up the things in her hand, put them on Lucas's desk, and said, "This is a gift of thanks." Lucas waved his hand and said, "I can't accept it. The matter is over. I just did what I wanted to do at that time." Nora pursed her lips and said, "If you don't accept my gratitude, I'll never get over it." She pushed the bag on the table towards Lucas. "It's just some pastries. Just a little token of my appreciation." Since it was pastries, Lucas accepted them. He opened the bag curiously and asked, "What is it?" Nora said, "Walnut cakes. Inhaling that kind of thing is always not good for the nerves. Eating some walnuts can nourish the brain." Fortunately, Nora continued, "I've also eaten them. I feel they have a good effect." Lucas truly admired her from the bottom of his heart. He took the walnut cakes, indicating that he appreciated the thought. Only then did Nora become happy and return to her position to continue working. Lucas hadn't come to work for a week and had left behind many things. On the first day of work, he kept dealing with them until very late. The situation at blceries was not optimistic, which also dragged down Yaoi. The speed car project jointly undertaken by the two companies encountered obstacles. blceries couldn't get its funds back now, and the ongoing project was almost unsustainable. Just at this time, the R&D Center was holding back the technology and not allowing Yaoi to intervene. As a result, the progress of the speed project was seriously delayed. Leo was also very busy today. He had been in the office looking at materials and making phone calls. It was already dark outside the window. Lucas stood up from his position and knocked on the door of the president's office. He entered the office and asked Leo, "Mr. Leo, do you need to have a meal?" Leo stared at the computer screen without even turning his head and said, "No." Lucas didn't disturb him anymore and backed out. After reading this paragraph, Leo came out of his work train of thought and only then realized that Lucas hadn't eaten either. So he got up, walked outside, and wanted to invite Lucas to have a meal in the company canteen together. As a result, when he walked out, he didn't see Lucas. But the documents were still spread out on the table, so he should still be nearby. Leo walked to the pantry and sure enough saw Lucas inside. He was having snacks in the pantry. Seeing the president coming, Lucas quickly put down the food and said, "Mr. Leo, is there anything?" Leo frowned and said, "You either drink or eat in the office. Don't you know you're violating the rules?" Lucas was no longer the new employee who just followed whatever the leader said. He said righteously, "I guarantee I won't drink again. As for eating, it's not working time now. It should be allowed to replenish energy during overtime." He had asked Leo if he wanted to have a meal before and got a negative answer. He was too lazy to go to the canteen by himself. Remembering the walnut cakes sent by Nora, he took them out and went to the pantry to fill his stomach. Of course, Lucas also knew that Leo wasn't being serious. He picked up the food bag and held it in front of Leo, asking, "Mr. Leo, do you want to have a taste?" Just as Leo was about to say no, he heard Lucas say, "These are the walnut cakes sent to me by Assistant Joseph. They taste good." Leo raised his eyebrows and repeated, "She sent them to you?" Lucas nodded and said, "She said it was a thank you gift. Actually, she didn't need to be so polite." Leo lowered his eyes and looked at the bag of pastries. Lucas recommended again, "Don't you want to have a taste? They're quite delicious. I don't know which store they're from. I'll ask Nora next time." There was no logo on the bag and the packaging was very simple. The pastries were neatly placed in the bag with baking paper underneath. They didn't seem to be from a cake shop but rather handmade. It was obvious that a lot of thought had been put into them and they were full of sincere feelings. Seeing that Leo didn't respond, Lucas thought forget it. Who knew that Leo would reach out, take the bag into his own hands, and say flatly, "Confiscated." After saying that, he carried the things and walked out of the tea room. Lucas stared blankly at the back of the president, looking extremely confused. Why did he even snatch his food? He should have left him at least some. The virtuous Leo. "If you want to eat, I'll make it for you." After Lucas came back, he quickly got the stagnant work back on track. But a series of things that followed made him even busier. Because the progress of the speed project was not going smoothly, Chairman Mason got angry and warned the Bang group that if they couldn't solve the problem as soon as possible, he would directly demand liquidated damages from Bang, according to the contract. As for Carter, he was firmly suppressed by Leo. No matter how many lawyers he found, it was useless. Kidnapping was kidnapping, an established fact. Carter was definitely going to jail. Alexander tried to seek help from foreign capital, but others weren't fools. Given the current situation of Sherexion, unless they offered a large amount of concessions, no one would be willing to invest money in it. At this time, Leo convened a core meeting within the company. The theme of the meeting was what Shirway should do in Sherexion's current situation. Some people thought that Sherexion had brought this upon itself and should be left to fend for itself, having nothing to do with Shirway. Some others believed that, after all, it was a sister company, and it was impossible to completely sever ties. Shirway would surely be affected. It would be better to give it a hand and settle the speed project as soon as possible, so as not to drag Shirway down. There were also some clear-headed people who expressed their views. What's the use of our arguing here? In the end, it still depends on what the group decides. If the group was willing to listen to us, they would have given us the core technology long ago. Would the speed project have dragged on until now? Everyone nodded in agreement. Lucas looked at this matter from the perspective of an employee. He thought that Sherexion probably didn't have a chance of making a comeback this time. Once it declared bankruptcy, there would be countless matters to handle in the aftermath. The resettlement fees for employees and the liquidated damages for projects were all huge sums of money. They would need to sell off assets and equipment to cover them. There were also issues involving the interests of shareholders. Just thinking about it gave Lucas a headache. But if they didn't declare bankruptcy and just let it drag on, it wouldn't work either. Sherexion was now a bottomless pit for the group. No matter how rich the group was, it couldn't fill it. At this time, Leo asked everyone to be quiet and stated his own thoughts. Everyone was stunned after hearing that. Several deputy general managers and senior executives exchanged glances with each other. Lucas was also stunned. He was again thinking from the perspective of an employee. If they followed what Leo said, wouldn't all those troublesome matters of resettlement and settlement just now have to be borne by Shirway? He suddenly realized that Leo probably had this plan long ago. So he had dealt with the internal problems of Shirway in advance. Taking advantage of the reorganization of the administrative department, he adjusted the personnel structure. At that time, some department heads were replaced. Recently, he also purged the moles in the president's office and marginalized some conservatives. Leo had his eye on Sherexion from the beginning and made arrangements in advance, wanting to gradually take over Sherexion. Since Lucas could figure it out, not to mention the senior executives present. Leo gave everyone enough time to think. After the silence, Leo asked for opinions. Do you all agree to do this? No one would say no because those who would oppose had already been kicked out by Leo. Lucas once again deeply admired Leo's scheming and shrewdness. This man would definitely achieve his target once he set his eyes on it. Moreover, he could keep calm and didn't care about anything that happened on the way to achieve his goal. It's just that the chairman definitely wouldn't be happy. Shirway reached a unified decision internally. Immediately afterwards, Leo called an emergency shareholders meeting of the group. Bang Group is a family-owned enterprise with a relatively complex power distribution. But most of the time, it's still the chairman Alexander who has the final say. As the actual controller of Shirway, in theory, Leo has the right to call a shareholders meeting. That day, Lucas followed Leo to the group's headquarters building. People were looking at him all the way. After all, on the surface, the crisis of Sherexion was caused by him. If Carter hadn't had his eye on him, Leo wouldn't have been further irritated and Carter wouldn't have ended up in jail. Many people were very dissatisfied with this matter. They thought Leo was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was not worth it for Carter to fall because of a junior secretary. Lucas didn't care about being treated like a rare animal. He couldn't control what others said behind his back. What made him a little angry was that Leo's treatment in the group was not high either. Of course, the shareholders didn't want anything bad to happen to Shirexyan. In many people's eyes, Leo was fighting against his own kind, being extremely cruel and heartless. Leo kept a straight face from beginning to end. Even when someone came specifically to provoke him, it didn't cause any reaction from him. Leo entered the meeting room with only Henry. Lucas guarded outside in case there was something he could help with. Lucas saw the shareholders arriving one after another. He hadn't met every shareholder with voting rights, so he just took this opportunity to get to know them today. Then he saw a man coming from the corridor and walking towards the meeting room. The man was wearing a well-tailored formal suit, with a straight back, a faint smile on his lips, and a calm look in his eyes. He walked gracefully, exuding an elegant and gentle demeanor. Lucas was stunned. He looked at the man several times before he was sure that it was Nolan, the eldest son of the Chin family. Different from his usual slovenly appearance, Nolan was dressed neatly today, and his hair was trimmed. There was no trace of a science geek on him. He had transformed into a wealthy young master. When Nolan passed by Lucas, he turned his head and smiled at him. That smile was reminiscent of a handsome young gentleman gently fanning himself, which surprised Lucas even more. "Beauty, long time no see. I heard you had a close brush with death." Nolan greeted Lucas actively. Fortunately, his tone was still familiar. Lucas quickly said, "Director Chin, hello? Thanks to you, I'm fine." Nolan smiled and said, "That's good." He noticed Lucas' suspicion and explained, "I'm here to attend the meeting on behalf of Wujin Capital today." No wonder he had changed his style. Today, Nolan was not Director Chin of the R&D Center, but the eldest son of Wujin Capital. Nolan glanced at the door of the meeting room and said, "Is Leo already here?" Lucas replied, "Yes, Mr. Leo has taken his seat." Nolan smiled again and said, "It's going to be a tough battle today." After saying this, he also walked into the meeting room. Lucas looked at his back and kind of understood the chairman's thoughts. Nolan was not an incompetent person. If he were to take charge of the company, maybe he wouldn't do as well as Leo, but his performance wouldn't be too bad either. It's just that he had put too much energy into scientific research. Lucas sighed in his heart. But anyway, he would definitely stand by his own president. He hoped Leo would win this tough battle today. Lucas silently cheered for Leo in his heart. Today's shareholders meeting was initiated by Leo, and the main topic is to discuss the future direction of Shirexyan. Most shareholders believe that Shirwei should take on the responsibility. No matter what method is used, whether it is contributing money or effort, it should help Shirexyan get through this difficult time. As for the group, it should quickly assign a new leadership to take over Carter's position. Chairman Alexander has always had a bad look on his face. After all, Carter has been his brother for such a long time. Now that Carter has fallen into Leo's hands, he always has complaints about Leo. Alexander has been urging Leo to take action to save Shirexyan. Almost everyone at the meeting has been putting pressure on Leo, but Leo naturally came prepared. Leo said, "Over the years, everyone has witnessed the operation of Shirexyan. Especially in recent years, it has asked the group for money every year and relied on others' relief. The debts it owes have far exceeded its contributions 10 years ago." Someone interrupted him and said, "But Shirexyan participated in the SPEED project this year and was on the right track. However, Mr. Carter suddenly had an accident and someone stabbed it in the back. There's no way Shirexyan could survive under such circumstances." Stabbing in the back refers to Leo exposing some loopholes in Shirexyan, which led to its debt crisis. Leo said, "If every project of Shirexyan had no problems, no fraud, And no shoddy work? Could this stab in the back succeed? He looked at the people at the meeting table and said, "Ask yourselves, have you ever had the fluke mentality of muddling through when dealing with Shirexian's affairs?" Leo spoke very bluntly. "Actually, you all know very well about Shirexian's problems. You just procrastinated day by day. As long as the problems were not exposed, you didn't care. Don't you know that Shirexian will eventually collapse if things go on like this? You know, but you didn't say anything or take any action. So today, I'll be the scapegoat and tear off the fig leaf." "That's enough," Alexander said sternly. "Everyone here is your elder. It's not your turn to teach us." Leo said, "I initiated today's meeting. Please let me finish speaking, Chairman." Alexander endured it and didn't say anything more. Leo continued, "I firmly believe that Shirexian should not continue to struggle on. However, if Shirexian goes into bankruptcy liquidation, the interests of many people, including myself, will be affected. So I propose another method." Everyone looked at him. Some people looked disapproving, some had a teasing look on their faces, and some looked solemn. Anyway, everyone pricked up their ears to listen to what Leo called his method. Leo said, "Let Shirway conduct an internal merger of Shirexian. Shirway is willing to take on most of Shirexian's debts and rebuild a new production park on the basis of Shirexian's original factory." Many people were stunned. Some who had realized Leo's intention before fell into deep thought. Someone immediately objected, "This won't work. Shirway doesn't have the ability to take over Shirexian. In the end, it will be dragged down and the gain won't make up for the loss. Shirway has been thriving in Leo's hands over the years and is the cash cow of the group. Just now, the shareholders scolded, but they really don't want to sacrifice Shirway. If you're asked to help out a poor relative, just give some money. You're not asked to risk your life. Everyone is a shrewd person and only considers their own interests." Leo said, "How do you know Shirway can't take it over? I'm the executive president of Shirway. I know what I'm doing. I have confidence in Shirway." The people present began to debate the feasibility of Leo's proposal. Only Alexander and Nolan realized that if Shirway could merge with Shirexian and successfully get through the early stage with heavy debts, once it got on the right track in the later stage, Leo's influence and power would be even greater. Alexander frowned and became more and more wary of his youngest son. Nolan let out a long sigh. Woojin Capital won't sit back and watch Leo become too powerful. The Fu family is going to take action. Lucas had been waiting outside the meeting room. He looked calm and composed, but actually he was very anxious. If the president's idea can be realized, then with the addition of the technical department of Shirexian, the previous technical bottleneck will completely disappear, and the company's production scale will also be further expanded. But the debt of Shirexian is too heavy. It will take most of Shirway's assets to bear it. In this way, one careless move and it may all go wrong. Leo is taking a gamble. Now it depends on whether the chairman is willing to give Leo this chance to play the game. Alexander has been very dissatisfied with Leo recently and may not be willing to support Shirway. This meeting lasted a whole day. Everyone was very tired. Even Lucas went into the meeting room several times, either to hand materials to Leo or to replace Henry so that Henry could take a break. But no one could share the burden for Leo. He always fought on the front line. Lucas looked at the president with pity. Although he looked calm and his body was still as straight as usual, Lucas knew that he had put in more effort and was more tired than ordinary people. Leo turned his head and met Lucas's gaze. He didn't say anything, just nodded to indicate that everything was going smoothly. Lucas really wanted to say, "Come on," to him, but at this time, Alexander, sitting in the main seat, suddenly coughed and said to Leo, "There's a document to be given to Shirway. Ask your secretary to go with Zoe to get it." It seems that the chairman has a psychological shadow and is very afraid that he will make moves like touching hands to seduce again. He tries every means to send him away. Lucas had to back out and follow the chairman's Zoe to the chairman's office to get the so-called document. Zoe's attitude was neither good nor bad. She walked in front to lead the way and didn't talk much to Lucas. This wasn't Lucas' first time in the chairman's office. The chairman's office of Bang-Tion was more spacious and had a more solemn style, but it didn't seem empty because it emphasized privacy, unlike the open workstations in Shirwei's president's office. Lucas followed Zoe inside. The chairman's office had a separate meeting area. As soon as they reached the meeting area, they saw someone inside. The man was sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed. He was wearing a well-tailored suit, and Lucas could tell at a glance that the suit was very expensive. He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, with a calm and gentle appearance. There was a laptop in front of him, but his eyes weren't on the screen. Instead, he was in a daze, looking at the green plants in the corner of the meeting area. Zoe didn't expect there to be someone here either. She looked at the man, wanting to say something, but also considering Lucas. The man waved his hand and said to Zoe, "Go about your business. Don't mind me." Only then did Zoe heave a sigh of relief. She bowed slightly to the man and said to Lucas, "Secretary Lucas, please wait here for a moment." Lucas said, "Okay, Sister Tang. Thank you for your hard work." Zoe entered the inner office area, and Lucas stood quietly in place, looking straight ahead. Since Zoe didn't introduce him and didn't talk to the man, he naturally wouldn't say much either. But Lucas could feel that the other person was looking at him. The cold and scrutinizing gaze sized him up from head to toe. Lucas straightened his back and didn't dare to move. Just now, Zoe had been respectful to this man, and he could appear in the chairman's office at will, which meant his identity must be extraordinary. What bothered Lucas was that this man gave him a feeling very similar to Leo. They both had an air of arrogance and nobility of the upper class, as well as the aura of being used to fighting in the world of fame and fortune. Moreover, similarly, there was no warmth in their eyes. It's just that Leo was more outward-looking, while this man was more introverted. Fortunately, Zoe came out soon and handed the document to Lucas. Lucas expressed his gratitude again and was about to turn around and leave. Before leaving, out of politeness, he turned to the man and bowed slightly as well. When he straightened up, he glanced at the man. The man was sitting in the sofa, resting his chin on his fingers, and looking at him intently. Lucas smiled to show his goodwill and respect, then strode away with the documents. When Lucas returned to the outside of the meeting room, he learned that the meeting had reached a preliminary conclusion. Most shareholders agreed that Shirwei should merge with blchina, but Nolan put forward a condition that Shirwei must accept the investment from Woojin Capital. Previously, Woojin Capital only participated in the economic activities at the group level. If it directly intervened in Shirwei, Leo's control over Shirwei would inevitably be affected. However, if Shirwei got this sum of money, the burden and pressure in the early stage of the merger would be much less, and the risks would also be reduced. The shareholders were very happy and immediately began to support the proposal of Woojin's investment. Leo didn't agree to this condition on the spot. After the meeting ended, the follow-up matters would be discussed another day. Leo brought the results of the shareholders' meeting back to Shirwei. The people in the company were a bit stunned and didn't know whether they should accept Woojin's investment. For Shirwei to merge with blchina, this sum of money from Woojin was like timely help, but who could guarantee that it wasn't inviting a wolf into the house? There were numerous cases of investors squeezing out the founders from the enterprise, especially since Woojin Capital was backed by the Fu family. The relationship between the Fu family and the Qin family was so delicate, and Leo's identity was particularly special. No one could guarantee that there wouldn't be any problems in the future. There were all kinds of opinions within the company. Some people agreed, while others opposed. In the end, it still depended on Leo's decision. Even Elena called. This time, she firmly opposed it, rather let blchina go bankrupt and be liquidated than let the Fu family intervene in Shirwei. Elena tried hard to dissuade Leo. Even if Woojin only provides the money and doesn't ask for the management right, it's still an extremely dangerous thing. You don't know what kind of person Joseph is, but I do. As long as you give him a chance, he'll tear you apart. You can't let him have an opportunity. Leo neither agreed nor disagreed with his mother's dissuasion. Leo listened to everyone's opinions, but he didn't make a decision for a long time. Regarding such a major decision that concerned the company's future, Lucas couldn't do much. He could only try his best to cooperate with Leo and make him feel more comfortable. Lucas made a cup of tea for Leo, still using different refreshing ingredients. Leo once picked on it, but Lucas thought he still liked it. The sharp aroma of mint was wrapped in the freshness of green tea and dissipated in the air as the water evaporated, making people feel refreshed. The summer evening was still sweltering. Although the air conditioning in the office was strong, it was still a bit stuffy. This cup of mint tea slightly relieved the irritation. Leo took a sip of tea and looked at Lucas. Lucas stood upright and let him look. After a while, Leo asked, "What's your opinion?" Lucas looked up and said, "Opinion on what?" Leo tapped on the table and said, "Stop pretending to be stupid." Lucas said cautiously, "Your opinion is mine." Leo put down the teacup and said, "Speak your mind. I'd like to hear your thoughts." He looked at Lucas with clear eyes. He had always been seeking opinions but had never shown a confused look. Lucas then said, "I think we should accept Woojin Capital." Leo raised his eyebrows and said, "Tell me in detail." Lucas paused for a moment and voiced his thoughts. The market for new energy is constantly expanding. It's a great loss if we don't seize the opportunity to develop in this booming industry. And merging with blxin is obviously the best way to improve our production capacity in a short time. Besides, we haven't solved our technical bottleneck yet. Lucas said slowly, "It's unrealistic for us to want to develop with the help of blxin and solve our problems without paying any price. Even if the shareholders are willing, the chairman and Nolan won't be. I think after weighing the pros and cons, we can afford the price of Woojin's investment." After Lucas finished speaking, he stared at Leo intently. Leo didn't comment on his words. He waved to him, signaling him to come over. Lucas took a few steps forward and came to Leo's side. Suddenly, Leo grabbed his hand and pulled him closer. Lucas was startled and said, "Mr. Leo, it's still working hours." Leo said, "Work ended just now." Lucas glanced at the time and found that it was really past 6 o'clock. But they often worked overtime and it wasn't dark outside yet. 6 o'clock was still early. Leo held Lucas's hand, looked up at him, and asked in a soft, low voice, "Was what you said just now a pillow talk? Why did the topic of side jobs suddenly come up?" Lucas' fingers were being played within Leo's palm, and he felt a bit embarrassed. Since the president overcame his cleanliness towards him, he always likes to touch him as if he finds it very novel. Lucas said, "I can't influence you at all. You know very well in your heart. The so-called pillow talk is just the fantasy of the chairman and Ms. Elena. It simply doesn't exist." Lucas has never seen anyone who can shake Leo's decision. Probably because he had been too tense recently, Leo rarely had the idea of joking. He hooked Lucas' hand and said, "Why can't you influence me? You yourself said you wanted me to love beauty over the throne." He didn't smile, but there was a glint in his eyes. "Now I'm cooperating with you. Whatever you say, I'll do." What kind of speech is this from a fatuous king? Your persona as the president is collapsing. Lucas complained in his heart that Leo was using him for entertainment and said, "Do whatever you want." "You're right. I'll do whatever I want." Leo let go of his hand and his expression returned to coldness. He said, "I have a cleanliness fetish. I don't like my things being touched by others, so I won't accept the money from the Fu family into my company." Lucas opened his eyes in surprise. Leo looked at him and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lucas tugged at the corner of his lips and said, "I thought, forget it. It seems I don't know you well enough." He thought Leo would accept Woojin Capital. Leo lazily drooped his eyes and asked, "Are you so confident in yourself? Thinking you can understand my thoughts?" Lucas said, "I used to think so, but now I'm not sure." Leo looked at him and said, "It seems you're not happy that I didn't follow your wishes." Lucas shook his head and said, "How could I be? No matter what decision you make, I'll support you and follow you firmly." "You're saying it so reluctantly." But Leo kind of liked the feeling of being a fatuous king. He started to get interested. "Well, since you're not happy, then I'll do as you say." Lighting the beacons to amuse the beauty, he announced, "Let Woojin Capital come with the money. We'll merge with blxin." After saying that, he deliberately asked, "Are you happy?" It's as if he changed his mind for his sake. In fact, Leo had already made up his mind and was just teasing him on purpose. Being led by Leo, Lucas then realized that the president was in a good mood and the matter of Woojin Capital hadn't affected him. Lucas squeezed Leo's palm in return and said with a smile, "As long as you're happy, I'm happy too." The next day, Leo convened a meeting of senior executives and decided to welcome Woojin Capital in and launch the merger plan at the same time. In this way, a solution to the matter of blxin was determined. From then on, blxin no longer existed. The employees, production lines, and market stores all became part of Shearway. When talking about the project with Speed last time, blchina already had a production line transformation plan and was going to adjust its focus to the production of power batteries, which happened to be useful during this merger period. Maybe it can't be said to be a coincidence. It was precisely because of these preliminary preparations that Leo took a fancy to blchina. With the dust settled, Carter was so angry when he learned the news in the detention center that he cursed the Chin family for being heartless. Alexander could only comfort him through a lawyer. There was no room for maneuver in the company's matter, but they would at least help him get a lighter sentence. And Elena wasn't particularly happy, but she had no way to interfere with her son's decision. There always seemed to be a stone hanging in her heart and she couldn't feel at ease. Leo accepted the capital injection from Woojin Capital, which diluted his shares. However, there was a condition that Woojin couldn't participate in the management of Shearway. Nolan, representing the Fu family, agreed. Nolan was the one who handled all the matters of contact with Woojin during this period. Lucas thought he did a good job and wasn't as ignorant of the business world as he had imagined. But it was also possible that there was an expert giving advice behind the scenes. Leo had a private meeting with Nolan and the address was chosen in Nolan's office in the headquarters building. This time when Leo went to the group headquarters, he only brought Lucas. Nolan's office in the group headquarters was rarely used before. There weren't even many documents. There was a post-modernist painting hanging on the wall which constructed a steel city with distorted lines and white wings were stuck on the city buildings. As soon as Lucas entered the office, he was attracted by this painting. He always felt that he had seen this style of artwork somewhere. This office has been used more recently. It was too empty and desolate, so I bought a new painting and hung it up. Seeing Lucas staring at the painting, Nolan explained, "I don't really understand art. Is it not good looking?" Lucas quickly said, "No, Director Chin, it has a very good taste. Are you very familiar?" Leo's cold voice sounded beside them. After Leo entered the office, he plopped down on the guest sofa and said nothing. Instead, Lucas and Nolan started chatting first. Seeing the president was unhappy, Lucas asked, "Mr. Leo, do you want me to leave?" Leo said, "No need." Nolan smiled and said, "Don't be so harsh to the beauty." Leo looked up and stared straight at Nolan. "What did you call him?" Nolan sat across from Leo and said generously, "Beauty." "Did I call him wrong?" "I've always called him that." Since Nolan changed his image, he has always had an air of a playboy. When he made teasing remarks, he was no longer flippant but rather had a gentle and amorous charm that was not annoying. But Leo showed no good temper. With a straight face, he said, "If Director Chin continues to flirt with my secretary, we can't discuss today's matter." He looked at Nolan coldly. "The last person who flirted with my secretary is still in the detention center." Nolan said with a smile, "I'm really a bit scared." The story of Mr. Leo flying into a rage is widely spread in the circle. Leo was a bit impatient and asked, "Shall we get down to business?" "Yes." Nolan responded, called his assistant over, and spread the materials in front of Leo. The two started to discuss business. This was the first time Lucas saw the two brothers together. It didn't count when there were too many people at the meeting in the headquarters before. Nolan once said that he didn't like businessmen, but now he was forcing himself to talk about business. Leo didn't look too happy either. He always had a grudge against this half-brother. After Leo read the document, he put forward some additional conditions. Nolan made decisions on some of the conditions on the spot, but couldn't determine the others. He asked his assistant to write them down one by one. Looking at this scene, Leo asked, "Why don't you just send someone who can make decisions?" This was equivalent to questioning Nolan's ability. Nolan wasn't angry either and said, "Because they think it's enough to send me to deal with you." Leo squinted his eyes. There was a faint smell of gunpowder in the air. Fortunately, neither of them wanted to talk nonsense, and they quickly got the matter done. Leo wanted to get up and leave, but Nolan stopped him and said, "There's one more thing. You don't need to study blchina's technical materials. Just send your R&D personnel to me directly. I'll tell them the key points of the charging module." Leo said mockingly, "You were so afraid of us knowing before, but now you're being generous. Things are different now. You understand the reason yourself." Nolan asked his assistant to go out. Only the Chin family brothers and Lucas were left in the office. With a smile on his lips, Nolan sized up the two people in front of him, his eyes full of playfulness. He asked, "Do you still remember Benjamin?" Lucas was startled and didn't understand why Nolan was bringing up his ex-boyfriend at this time. Leo frowned, seemingly really having forgotten who this person was. Nolan reminded him with a smile, the person you specifically called me about and asked me to take care of at that time. It was really thought-provoking that the younger brother's first call to the elder brother was actually about his secretary's ex-boyfriend. Leo immediately remembered. Lucas didn't know if Nolan believed that he and Leo were a couple. Bringing up the ex-boyfriend at this time made the atmosphere in the office a bit delicate. Leo asked, "Why are you bringing that person up?" Nolan said, "Why can't I bring him up? At that time, my dear younger brother called me for the first time. I was really extremely excited. I remember every word you said." Leo wasn't buying it. "If there's nothing important, we'll leave first." Nolan said, "Don't go. Let's discuss this person." As he said this, he looked at Lucas and curled his lips. Lucas was a bit embarrassed and said, "Director Chin, this person has a problem with his character. Don't keep us in suspense. Is he causing trouble again?" Only then did Nolan say, "It's not really causing trouble. It's just that the scientific research circle is very small. Especially in scientific research in City S, you can't avoid City S University. The R&D Center has signed a cooperation agreement with City S University. I kicked Benjamin out before, but recently people from City S University have been constantly coming to plead for him. Although this person's ability is average, all his senior and junior classmates, colleagues, and friends are connected with us. Many research results have his mark on them. I can kick him out of the team, but I can't stop him from working in this field, right?" Lucas understood what Nolan meant. He composed himself and said, "Director Chin, don't worry about me. Do as you see fit." Nolan smiled and said, "I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about him." He glanced at Leo. "I just called you a beauty and someone gave me a bad look." He said leisurely, "Actually, it's not a big problem. But since you've already tasted the bitterness of being stuck by technology, you'll definitely strengthen your R&D department. Then you won't be able to avoid this person's surname, Xie. I'm just giving you an early warning so that someone doesn't get a thorn in their eye." Leo and Lucas returned from the group, but Leo told the driver to go back on his own and ordered Lucas to drive. Lucas drove the car and sent Leo back to Yunting Mansion. Leo remained expressionless all the way, looking in a bad mood. Lucas thought he was worried about Nolan. When they arrived at the destination, the two didn't get out of the car immediately. Lucas turned his head and asked worriedly, "Mr. Leo, what should we do about Director Chin? Shearway was really passive when its technology was blocked before. One of the key focuses of this merger with SureXIN is to take this opportunity to vigorously develop the R&D department. Since Nolan has seen their intention, will he cause trouble?" Leo was sitting in the back seat. Hearing what Lucas said, he hooked his finger at him and then pointed to the seat beside him. Lucas immediately understood, got out of the driver's seat, walked around the car and sat beside Leo. It was late summer and the after heat of the summer was still there. The hot air rushed into the car as Lucas moved, bringing a burst of scorching heat. Lucas looked at Leo with a listening expression on his face and said, "Mr. Leo, what are your instructions?" Unexpectedly, Leo asked, "Are you very familiar with Nolan?" Lucas was stunned for a moment and replied, "Just okay." "Just okay, but you're so close to him?" "Wait, where were he and Nolan close?" Lucas defended himself, "I've only met Director Chin a few times. All our previous meetings were for business. You know that. Besides, Director Chin has such a personality and likes to joke." Leo leaned over, putting his hand on the back seat armrest. Fortunately, there was an armrest between them, otherwise Lucas would have thought Leo was going to surround him. Leo said, "After only a few meetings, he's so familiar with you. He sneered, calling you beauty all the time." Lucas didn't know what to say. Leo continued, "Also, before, the female assistant in the office reported you some time ago, but then she sent you snacks. Even your scumbag ex-boyfriend can't forget you. What great charm you have, Secretary Lucas."